So here we are once again, everybody. As a lot of you know, I've been doing an ongoing series of dealing with females in the gaming space, and I always try to expand the conversation because it's really easy to just tell the story that we all think that we want to hear about how the online world is extremely toxic all the time, and it's full of a bunch of horrible people, and that all we do is we sit in front of our computers or I'm in front of our consoles, and we say horrible things to each other. But in reality, it's there's so much more good stuff out there. And I have with me right now, you can see it on the screen in front of you that I'm recording. I have someone with me, and this just goes to show you the power of social media. She is the vice president of a she's the vice president of a startup, and vice president of a startup called Raise Your Game Esports, and she posted an article on LinkedIn about a month ago that I just found, talking about the realities of women in gaming and talking about why there aren't more women on teams. And I really liked her thought process because it went beyond just the simple fact of the barriers to opportunity or the apparent sexism of gaming in general, and she really broke it down into the economics of a situation. So I'll let her introduce herself. Her name is Jessica, and she's going to go into a little bit about her article, and hopefully we'll get some good conversation going here. So Jessica, go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, my name's Jessica Kitchen, and I am a community college professor. I've been teaching for about 6 years, but I'm also the vice president of Raise Your Game Esports, as mentioned. And I wrote the article called The Woes of Women in Esports, kind of talking about my take, my views, and kind of, my epiphany when it came to kind of the marginalized aspect of women in esports. I have come from a background of gaming and on both PC as well as consoles. And, I have been a victim of, that nastiness, that toxicity that you mentioned. And, we have to do something different. We have to do something to show the equality of men and women in this space, and really make an effort to have some diversity when it comes to teams and when it comes to organizations, and even when it comes to streaming. They just released the top 10 names for the best streamer 2018, and there's literally only one woman on the entire list. And so these are things that I'm super, super passionate about. And I feel like my education and my experience and everything has kind of led me to this point in my career so that I can make an impact on that.
So as far as the article itself, I mean, if anybody wants to read the article, you can go on Jessica's LinkedIn profile and you'll see it there. It's the article that she's written. And you talk about the economic factors that go into what it means for men and women to be on the same squad, to function together, to coexist in the same space. Now, and it's important to know that when it comes to the training and the day-to-day operations of a team, what you see when the team is on stage is really only about 10% of the actual team's time. So the other 90%, they're traveling and they're eating and they're sleeping and they spend time practicing. So you talk about how there's so much more to it that we, as the regular consumer of esports, watching it, there's so much more to it. So go into that a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, working in higher education, I am very attentive to the differences between men and women and what you're allowed and not allowed to do just in that space in education. Women have to have their own bathrooms, men have to have their own bathrooms. There's this separate but equal concept that is already prevalent in the higher education system. And then when you look at esports, there's this same concept that I can then use my perspective to kind of apply to it. So, in my article, I talk about logistics. And, logistics has a lot to do with budget as well. It costs money to travel, it costs money to stay in hotels, it costs money to stay in houses. All these things take money. And from a team perspective, it is more expensive to have special needs met for women. We can't put a woman in a man's room just, for that privacy, as well as it can lead to a lot of other issues. And I'm not saying that professional gamers aren't professional enough to keep things separate
Mm-hmm.
from work and private life. But at the same time, these are young adults in most cases, and they're living their dream and want to take full advantage of that as well. So it's bound to happen that there could be, someone catching feelings for someone else. There can be disputes between people when you start adding in other genders. And I think that the aha moment in this was just like, for functionality, having a team house, you would have to have two separate living areas for men and women, and that would increase cost and that would increase the bottom line. And make it that much more difficult unless you have an all women team and an all men team. When we are talking about the out of competition time, how it is spent, what it is that we're allowing or giving or providing for these team members. And even in traveling, staying in separate hotel rooms. If you have a bunch of boys, you can throw them all in the same room usually. I mean, I've been on many, school trips and work trips and things like that. And, women have their own space and men have their own space in all of these aspects. And the same would go for a professional, esports organization as well. They would need to have separate space for men and women. Of course, practice space can be together,
Right.
but living quarters would have to be separate, and that increases the cost, and that increases travel costs, that increases a lot of things. And this is a struggle that the military has had as well.
Right.
The American military has had this problem with women serving in the Navy on submarines, and there is one submarine that is now co-ed, but it took creating an entire new submarine for that to happen that has separate quarters for women as it does for men. Because, if it's just a bunch of men, it's okay. They can all use the same bathroom. They can all
Right.
sleep in the same room. But that's not the case with women, because it can lead to further legalities. It can lead to more costs. It can lead to problems and sexual assault and so much more. And it's a risk. And I think that this is something that a lot of people don't really take into consideration.
Right. And I completely see what you're saying. You are 100% correct, because just in general, how the sexes interact. There's a, I mean, you could, and this is going to sound horrible, but I'll say it. When you get a group of guys together, they talk to each other differently than if it's mixed, and it's the same way with females. Girls in a group, by the just girls, they interact differently when things are mixed, and so you're going to have communication issues that could spill over into competition and practice. And the analogy that you draw with the Navy is even more important. We're talking about the security of a submarine that costs hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more. You're talking about high tech people who are highly skilled, and that in an emergency situation, if there are lives in jeopardy, you need people to perform their tasks, and whatever conflict exists between the group, that has to be set aside. That thought process has to be like set aside and dealt with, later, so that you can solve the problem in front of you. And I think there's also, when you talk about costs, I think it's important to note when you have a professional team, especially, that the men and women have different needs when it comes to their what am I trying to say, their health. Women have different needs than men. It's not better or worse, it's just different, and so that also increases the cost. There are factors to consider there. So I guess what is the answer then? I mean, we can sit here all day and we can say, this is a problem and this is a problem and this is a problem, but I like to talk about what's a solution. What is the answer to this? I mean, is it going back to a guy's team and a girl's team? Is it understanding that if you have an Overwatch team and it's a five player squad that actually competes, but then you have substitutes perhaps, do you always have to have the same ratio of guys to girls? Do you always have to have 4 and 4 or 3 and 3? So I guess from your perspective, what's the answer to this?
And I've thought about this quite a bit, and I'm reminded of like the Greek system in colleges and universities, right? Mm-hmm. They will have sorority houses and then fraternity houses, men and women, right? Mm-hmm. But those men and women still take classes together. Those men and women still attend events together. They still do things together, but their living quarters are separate. Okay. So I think it is important, as an organization, for these orgs to think of them as orgs instead of as their individual teams. A lot of times these organizations create team houses that are for the team at hand instead of organization houses that can house multiple members of their teams in one location, and then they can go to their training facility and train together, right? If we had organizational houses instead, you can have multiple women on multiple teams, multiple men on multiple teams, and they would still be living together in their gender associated houses, but then they're all within the same vicinity, they're all able to go to practices together, they're all able to do teamwork and do any sort of building in that respect. Because I think that a lot of organizations are making strides to have women teams, women only teams, and I still think it has to do with those logistics. But there's still not enough. There's still just a handful of pro women that are being selected by these organizations and being part of these teams. And I think that if we were to think about it more as that fraternity, sorority kind of setup where, there's the guy's house and there's the girl's house, but then they have like the events together and
Mm-hmm.
the practices together and all these things together, then it would be more open to having more professional females. There would be more room for them. There would already be the logistics in place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this goes to those individuals who are investing in esports and those brands who are sponsoring and those companies that are sponsoring and providing money or providing the housing to think, okay, we need to provide two houses, one for men, one for women, you know,
Mm-hmm.
with the training facility as well. And then, it does increase cost as well because then you would need, you know, a staff member in charge of the women's and a staff
Mm-hmm.
member in charge of the men's as well to make sure that that's running well, just like in fraternities or sororities, how they had like, the mother of the house or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So I think it's something that has been around for so long, but in different aspects that can still be applied to the esports market. Um, in that regard.
Okay, so then let's take this conversation to the next level. What? How do I phrase this? So we connected on LinkedIn because I did a post about Makomi-chan and how she's a professional gamer and she's very good at what she does. On top of that, she's also married. She has a son who is 5 years old. So how do we address that portion when gamers start having families and so does that mean that they cannot compete anymore? Does it change how they compete? If they do compete, are we talking about now sort of a the a third sort of housing concept? I mean it this whole conversation is totally brand new, and so I don't want people to think that I'm trying to cause problems here. I'm trying to see the whole picture, and I'm trying to get some answers fleshed out here. So what this really is, I guess for me, is just sort of a brainstorming thing. So when you have these people together and they decide to start getting married and having families together, what do you do? You know what I'm saying?
Right, absolutely. And everyone knows, just like professional sports, that there is a time limit, right? There
Mm-hmm.
is an optimal time to be professional, and then you tend to retire because you kind of age out. Your reflexes aren't as quick.
Mm-hmm.
You're not as agile. This happens in professional sports as well as in esports.
Right.
Um, because reflexes and things like that are tend to be better younger. And can you work to improve that, and can you work to keep that at a top level? Absolutely. But you still tend to age out, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times when professional athletes age out, they still stay in the same field, but they take on new jobs, right?
Right.
So they become coaches or managers or anything like that. And in this esports space, since it is growing so rapidly, this is going to start to happen,
Right.
even though it hasn't truly happened. I mean, we can take Nadeshot as an example. He's the CEO of 100 Thieves, and he was a pro gamer. He played for Optic Gaming, and he kind of aged out of that pro level and kind of started his own team. He saw what he didn't like and then what he did like, and he tried to develop his own team, his own brand around that would provide better for its members, and that would be more inclusive and things like that. And I think that as we start to think about an aging population, as we start to think about family growth and individuals like that, then we need to start thinking about these organizations from a business perspective. And these players are your employees. They are your employees. When an employer wants somebody on their team bad enough, they will, provide for them a place to stay. Employee housing is a big thing in many of the large corporations. Employee housing is a norm, and it's family housing. And this is the same for the military. There's family housing. They provide you with a house, you pay a rent out of your pay, whatever.
Hmm.
But it is normal. This isn't a new concept. It's just a new market.
Right.
And we just have to apply all these other concepts from all these other markets into this one, and it just hasn't happened yet.
Right. And I totally I totally agree with you. I mean, these issues that we're hashing out, they're not new concepts. They're new concepts for this generation, because we think that, and this I guess this this is this is this is recency bias playing out, but because of the explosive growth of esports, we have this perception, or at least gamers have this perception, that they're dealing with a whole new set of issues. That we're breaking new ground. These are things that have ever been dealt with before. When in reality, we're just taking old thought processes and we're making them brand new again. And so, how do you solve the age-old problem of putting males and females in the same space, and then they end up forming bonds and relationships like they always do, and they end up having families like they do, and they need jobs and benefits and support, and they need all these things. And here we are with esports, and we're sitting here working through the same problems that our parents had, and our grandparents and our great grandparents. How do you make life work? How do you come together? How do you, with the resources you have, how do you achieve your goals and your dreams, both on a professional level, on a personal level? How do you pass down skills to those after you? How do you give respect to those who came before you? And this is the kind of conversation that isn't going to be solved in the 20 minutes that we've been sitting here, but this is an ongoing thing, and you're going to see different viewpoints. You're going to see different solutions that work in different areas in different ways. And this is why I love esports so much, is that it's the next thing, I guess. Guess the best way to say it. It's the next thing that brings us together, and it gives us hope for schooling, so you can get an education, hope for a job. There's so many different ways to make a living in esports, and I think that's only going to get larger as we go forward. And so I want to thank you, Jessica, for taking time to talk to me today. As we shut this down, is there anything that you would like to promote? Anything that you'd like to shout out?
Just to kind of just reiterate kind of what I talked about.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this can be remedied with re-education, and this is re-education of communication, of respect, of teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
And places of employment will go through this. They will have team building exercises. They
Right.
will have trust exercises. Anyone who wants to get along better with other people and build stronger bonds will do things like this. And I think if we look at our sponsors, and if we look at all these different things, we can come to some sort of organization level changes that can open the doors more for women in the esports space. But I will be writing a lot more for Raise Your Game Esports and doing more podcasts. Um, so, anyone who would like to kind of see that or anything can follow us on any social media or connect with me, and I'd be happy to do that.
Awesome. This has been a great conversation, and I hope we can do more of these going forward. And I appreciate your time very much. So everybody, thank you very much for tuning in. And like I said, you can find Jessica on LinkedIn. Her profile is right there on the screen. And everybody, thank you very much for stopping by. I've trying to make this series an ongoing thing. It's been a lot of it's seen a lot of success and seen a lot of eyeballs, and I thank everybody who has taken the time to share my stuff and to read it and to comment. So thank you very much, and Jessica, thank you again, and I hope that we can talk again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
If you liked that, hit the subscribe button for more interviews and other great sports and esports content. Make sure to also like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter to stay up to date on all the news from your favorite sports and esports players and teams. From our house to yours.